Bam.
This is Jonam Ross, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
My brain would not allow me to remember your name until I saw it written. And so I apologize because I kept, and also there was a little bit of drinking going on too, which doesn't help exactly with the, the name getting right game. But
You should have a few shots now. Have a few shots now. It'll be state-dependent learning.
Yes. We met at SpyQ, the fabulous SpyQ, a conference designed to help regular people use spy type skills to create the outcomes that they want. I think that's probably a good fair way to say that. When Gavin and James approached you about speaking, how did that relationship start? How did you get to be on the stage? You had quite a bit of stage time.
Yeah. Well, I've known those guys for a few years. So I think I met them both through the sort of behavioral science study world. And then I think Gavin was also a friend of a friend. So we've been traveling in the same circles for a few years. They both came to my wedding last year. So, we've been in contact and chatting about what we're doing. And then eventually, they said, we're running this event, and would you like to come? Would you like to be one of the speakers? And it felt very organic, the kind of natural relational development of how, people are working on things and you support each other. And it's just a nice way to operate, I find. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, it was, and it worked out well. There was a lot of expertise in that room.
Yeah.
Some of the expertise is created in theoretic environments. I think you and I both have done a lot of real ground truth experience for us to develop our time. And it's one thing to have had access to the ground truth. It's another to have mastered what that looks like as you work in that environment. How am I doing? How do you like my thoughts on like the theoretic and the ground truth, and then that higher grade of ground truth where you've had repeated access and you discover, and I'll guess this for you, you've discovered a lot of things that have been discovered by other people, but you discovered them independently.
Yeah, it's like you go on a course or you read a book, and it gives you a framework for that thing that you'd figured out before, but just never quite turned into a formula or something. Yeah, that's happened a lot. And I find there are a lot of sort of professionals or experts who are very much in the theoretical space, or at most the real world experience they have is within a seminar or within a classroom, which is fine. I guess that's still the real world, but it's not the same thing as living and breathing something with a bunch of people who maybe aren't bought into the efficacy of the techniques being taught. So the real world experience, I think, is one of the best teachers, but also, like you alluded to, getting enough of it, because a little bit of real world experience can be just enough to form some biases or maybe confirm some biases. Whereas the more experience you're able to get in whatever you're doing, it gives you those reference points to challenge the biases and the preconceptions and see, okay, maybe this perspective is a bit skewed. I need to correct that. So yeah, I think all of these things, behavior, influence, hypnotherapy, whatever it is, like what you can learn in a book or a classroom is proven and refined through the practice of it, for sure.
You and I had a brief conversation, and I was a little bit critical of this. And this is me setting up a really powerful conversation for everybody else, where we often talk about strategy and tactics, but we rarely loop that back around and go, do the tactics feed the strategy?
Yeah.
And that's tough, because it's like, here's my outcome, and then I'm just going to have this outcome, and then the tactics, who cares, right? But the tactics, they're the grist, they're the corn in the mill. If you don't have that, you can just have two stones just slipping on each other, and you can absolutely fool yourself into believing what you think is working is working. And I'm going to say one more thing here. This is when I learned about affect over effect. So we say effect, and we don't know which one we mean, if it's an A in front of it, an E in front of it. When there's an A in front of it, it's the emotional response to stimuli. When there's an E in front of it, it's I climbed the ladder, and so now I'm 12 feet in the air, right? And these things behaviorally, they don't, affect is greater than effect, because I can create the outcomes I want through using emotions. Not only am I getting my outcome, and I don't got to be accurate, just got to be in this cone of success.
Yeah.
it's boy, it changes things. And I said this at the thing, like you could write 12 love letters. If there's no love at the end, that's effect thinking.
Yeah.
But if you do the right thing at the right time, you don't even need one love letter to make love happen.
Yeah. Yeah, the tactics and the strategy have to work in tandem, because otherwise, either extreme on its own is doomed to failure. Like some strategist sat in an office somewhere going, "Yeah, here's the plan." If it's completely divorced from the reality or the abilities of the people actually implementing it, then it's screwed. Likewise, if you have people on the ground just doing the best they can from that perspective without the overarching thing of what are we driving towards and why, then they can make some progress, but it's missing something. So yeah, it's when we were speaking about it, it was really well made point that the strategy and tactics, one isn't more important than the other, but
Right.
they fulfill very important roles and they rely on each other. So it's not like a hierarchy, it's more of a partnership.
Yeah. And then you can add in the operational, the logistics to ensure that these things happen. It's one thing to say, hey, we're going to have these great tactics and train somebody. But if you don't feed those people, if you
Yeah.
don't let them know where to go, if you don't study the tactic and is it having the affect you want and the effect you want,
Mhm.
then again, you've turned on a machine that in theory works, but it's perforated going vertically. If this sounds esoteric, everybody, it is. But if the goal is to connect, in my case, to connect the people to the government, and so Pete comes in as a checking device, and he's like, "Hey, there's no connection there. I can't pick it up." And if the machine is like, "Shut the fuck up, Turner," and they just
Yeah.
keep going, you haven't fixed the device, right? And so that you have to check the quality of the signal as tactics feed strategy, and that requires operational thinking, logistical thinking, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason, so during the event, I was speaking more about the sort of strategic level of what are we doing and why. The reason for that is it's something I've noticed in the sort of behavioral training space. Maybe you've noticed it too, is that there's a lot of focus on the nitty gritty of how do you embed commands into a sentence and all of this kind of thing. And so there's the space seems to me to be very saturated with that. And
Yeah.
so I can come in and parrot what everybody else says and not really add anything of unique value. But being able to zoom out and see, okay, before I get pulled down a rabbit hole of rehearsing scripts for a different way to seed an idea or whatever, it's like, how can we make sure that even if our tactics are rudimentary because we're developing them or it's a new skill, we can
Right.
still skew the odds in favor of success because we're working to a bigger picture. So that was my thinking, and that's where
Yeah.
I like to approach it. My general philosophy is that most people have pretty much all the knowledge they need to have a pretty amazing life. We all know to stay hydrated. We know to, not run over budget and all these basic things, and yet will not act equal to the knowledge. And so then the
No.
question is, how can you bridge the gap between what you know how to do versus what actually comes out behaviorally? And that's really the area that I focus the most on when I'm working with people one-on-one.
There's so much in that. I mean, it's that you need the rabbit hole, but also, yeah, you can't get so far into a rabbit hole that you're in a warren and you don't even know your way out. You just study
Yeah.
that warren, but that warren has power, and you understand what's in there. So you're right. You're always trying to, and I've come to realization. Tell me what you think about this. We talk about all things in balance, like balance is ever like this. Like I'm balanced right now. Really, balance is like this. Jesus,
Yeah.
and you're always trying to balance, especially if there's more than one axis to deal with, right? And
Yeah.
so we talk about the strategic, and it's great to have a goal. I'm fond of saying culture abhors design. So when people say things like, "Hey, well, we'll just build a culture that will do this and that," that ain't happening, man. That ain't
It's
happening. Culture just defies that. It's so hard to build a culture, and I defy anybody to reliably with who's not culturally smart. And there's a requirement for that. You don't just get to declare, "I am culturally smart." You don't
Mhm.
get to do that. So that rabbit holing, searching out the warrens, but also going up into the balloon to overlook and go, oh fuck, I am in the wrong spot altogether. It requires a lot of critique and a lot of checking in a system to ensure that these behaviors and everything are working.
Well, I can give a very concrete example that I think most people have seen. I've seen it so many times, which is, let's say someone's been in a very toxic relationship, or maybe they're in a cult or something like that. They make the extraction, they're out of it. And then what do? They say, well, I want to avoid this in the future. So I'm going to buy every book on narcissism that I can. I'm going to buy all the books on body language and how to spot deception. And like they could give you a whole thesis on the details of toxic relationships and what to avoid and all of this. And then 3 years later, if not sooner, they're in the exact same relationship, just with a different person. And so the knowledge, it's not that the knowledge is bad, but it's just that when, for instance, in that case, if our sense of deservedness is I deserve to be treated like crap, then you can learn all these things, and then you have a very high resolution insight into all the red flags as you ignore them, and then suffer down the line because of it. So like the knowledge is important, but it doesn't solve sometimes the deeper drivers that are leading towards the bad outcomes.
Yeah, and quite often the book you need to buy is How Do I Stop Picking, Sociopaths and Narcissists, and usually if you can put time and work into your own self in a reliable way where it's better for you, that often is a bigger solution, right? Like we love to find where the work is for somebody else or something else, but we loathe to find the work where the work is for us. Like, where should I be putting my feet forward in a positive direction today and tomorrow? I'm working on a bunch of big things, and it's easy to get 10 years into the future. But what are we going to do today that we have to do? Otherwise, it becomes 11, 12, 15, never into the future, because we haven't done the immediate tactical work to feed that outcome.
Yeah, that's what creates momentum. And momentum drives change a lot more than a plan does. We can make plans till the cows come home, but it's the daily actions that we're taking, like that's what's going to change the actual trajectory, isn't it?
Yeah. And you also don't get to own the outcomes. You can kind of point towards a North Star, but the next company that goes and nudges to the right or left or whatever of that star won't be the first or last to do that. We often end up surprised by where we end up, and also surprised at how hard it was. We leave out a lot of hard steps.
Yeah, I heard it described in a really cool way once, where I don't know who said it to attribute it, but they said that life is like playing a game of chess, and you can plan it out, have a strategy, but you can't predict what the other player is going to do. And that player is life itself. But it's more than just a 2D board. It's 360 degrees. And when you connect the dots looking backwards, it's like the good things and the bad things, a lot of them, like you couldn't have predicted them. And so then it's important to have the plans, but it's also important to have the dynamism and the adaptability to then say, okay, what's this situation showing me? How can I respond to it now, whether or not that was in the mission plan that didn't know about this in advance?
When we look at what the mission plan is, again, like this is all this behavioral stuff. How do you lead a group of people in a way that isn't so scatterbrained and crazy that they can't believe in it? Yeah, my buddies and I a few years ago had a race car that we would race around. And one of the guys was the leader. And once he committed and said, we're going to make it to the race, we got it behind him and said, yes, we are. We're all going to work on this. We understand the goal. We understand that because you believe it's going to happen, right? And it was great to see that energy. Now, look, it was going to be a running gunfight the entire time. It was going to be hard, right? We're going to exhaust ourselves and be shitty to one another. But that's what it took for us to decide, yes, we're going to. And once he stopped doing that leadership role, we had to break apart, and we don't race anymore because of that. So it was a very tenuous thing, and we worked at improving it. But I don't know that we ever figured out the solution to that leadership problem.
Yeah, having a great leader or someone who's kind of driving it in that way is such a huge thing. And I think a lot of it boils down to the bystander effect. where we'll not do anything, and then we see someone taking whatever the action is, and then we'll follow suit. And I think as groups, maybe this is a cultural thing. This is certainly true in the UK. Is that as a group of people, it's like optimism or saying, yeah, let's go for this, or let's make a plan, let's really follow it through. There's a bit of anxiety around that, or you don't want to be the one who's seen to be kind of suggesting a potentially bad idea, or whatever. Like the peer pressure or the social proof kind of keeps people from striding out. And so when you have that one person or a few people who really get the vision and they're like, we're going to make this happen, then that is contagious, and it kind of sets the precedent, which gives the permission for other people to start, thinking and acting in that direction too.
How do you sustain that?
How do you sustain it? I think, well, for one thing, it depends on your environment, I guess. So the team itself all having similar levels of training and commitment. This is one of the things I've always been envious about my military friends. I've never been in the military, but they talk about the experience of being in a unit of guys who've all been through the same or equivalent training, and you know what's going to happen in terms of like the SOPs, and it's kind of this collective brain where you're all basically at the same level and on the same page, working towards the same thing. Like that's invaluable in terms of replicating that in the civilian world. Taking part in the shared training, making sure you all know what your individual roles are, but most importantly, I think revisiting the vision's a really fluffy word for it, but the actual purpose of things, and reviewing that. There have even been cases where companies will have the elevator pitch of their project just memorized by everyone in the organization, from the CEO to the janitor. Yeah. And as that's happened, that's resulted in a massive uptick in productivity and profitability. So, well, why would that be? Just having people on the same page, it seems to create this kind of syncing up where it's like setting the rhythm like a metronome, so that then people can organize around that. So I think the leader's job, as much as the practical aspects of it, is making sure that they keep their eye on that North Star, so that they can then communicate that to the people around them. But ultimately, I'm curious what your experience has shown with that as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. The military, at our best, we have a commander, and he says, or she says, depending on the unit you're in. I've worked mostly for male commanders, but they'll say, here's the rope, here's what it's attached to, pull as hard as you can. And we all go, yes, sir. Even if we disagree with it, we're like, this is never going to work. Doesn't matter. Once the commander says, we are going to pull on this rope as hard as we can, and then you pour your heart into making that happen, Mm-hmm. And so it's a thing that doesn't translate well to the civilian world. The commander is given options. He's like, I take option 3. And everybody's like, oh, I mean, yes. And then we all pull as hard as we can. So there's that thing. I guess that's the first place to really throw the ball back to you is that unity of effort. Now, look, that's at our best, and it's not as pure as I'm making it sound. There's a lot of, not dissent, but there is grumbling. And there's a guy like me who's like, I see you all pulling on this rope, and you thought you'd have the rock moved 10 feet by today. You haven't nudged it, and it's not to be a critic. It's to say this, in what you described, is not working. So I would look at an operation. They would say, here's the effort, here's the output. And I would say, that output's not there. That output's not there. And the commander would be like, hey, hold on, slow down. Let's figure out what's going on here. What do you mean the output's not there? And I would describe why. And then everybody get mad at me. And then the boss would be like, here's what we're going to do. And then they would adjust the organization, because you make the big decision of let's all yank on this rope, but you still have to move the rock.
Yeah. Yeah. Is the objective to pull on the rope or to move the rock? Yeah.
Right. And when someone's like, I swear it's working, and then someone else goes, it's not, I was there, I just looked at it. 'Cause one of the things I would do is I would hear about the mission coming. I would go to that area, not talk about the mission at all. Then I would leave. Then I'd come back with the mission, and then I would leave. And then I would come back after the mission, and I would before, during, after report, and that's very clear on the conditions on the ground truth, what happened. And I'm not looking for what everybody else is looking for. I'm looking for your version.
Mm,
The farmer. What does the farmer say? Because that helps us see better where to affix the rope to the rock. If everybody's like, oh, we don't move it that way. We use a lever, and actually that rock is smaller than this big rock over here.
mm,
Or you can move this small rock all day long, and that would help us enormously, just moving small rocks all day long. But we don't
mm.
think about that because we're so focused up in the hot air balloon or the spaceship that we can't see what actually is needed on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the old thing of, well, what's the best way to drive a car? Should you drive it fast or slow? Should you indicate and all of these things? Like, well, the answer is drive as the conditions allow. Like,
Right.
what's the road environment? What are the speed limits? What's the weather like? What's the traffic like? All of these things. If you're not responding to the feedback around you, then you're just flying blind. You're a danger to yourself and others. And that same principle applies everywhere in life. Like, if we're not paying attention to the feedback we're getting, we fall into the trap. I think Nietzsche had a quote about this where he says, many people are committed to the path they have chosen and few in goal. We get stuck in these ruts.
Yeah. Yeah. When the other part about the leadership thing and accomplishing things is a good leader. My buddy Scott's a great leader. He's a Marine and it's just great at doing things. And I invited him to come up with me to my hometown. So we drove, 6 hours, 7 hours up to my hometown so he could speak. He's an author.
Mm.
And I was overly amped up because I wanted him to have I wanted my town to show up for him. I wanted my town to enjoy him coming up there. It's a pretty special thing because I'm from a little small town to have a very successful person come up. And
Yeah.
so I was pinging. I was too much. I was too much. He's like, Pete, relax. All that matters is that I get there and I have the book event. That's all I care about. I know we're going to do that. And so like the mission really was accomplished. And he took all the weight off me of the responsibility of making it perfect. And he's
Mm.
like, no, we're already doing it. We drove up here. I had a great time driving with you. We're going to, go tour the couple spots in the city. I love that about you and what you're doing. Everything's great, man. So, so I was able to go, oh, I get to enjoy this and not just go crazy spinning out because that was all me. And so he took that off of my back and said, hey, this is easy. We're just going to have a book event. I'm going to talk. We're having a great time. I'm going to meet your friends. I'm going to meet your mom, all that kind of thing.
Mm.
And so that leadership ability to set the standard, the standard's already high. We already had to drive 7 hours. I already had to get a world famous author to come to my hometown. I had all these things. We'd already accomplished all the hard stuff.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. You find a lot of people who hold high standards for themselves. Then there's like such a high threshold to just be happy or to enjoy something that those reminders of like, hey, it's okay. And you can enjoy the process as well. It's like, oh, geez. Yeah. Now you mention it, I actually can.
Yeah. And I've taken that model and I've amplified what Scott gave to me. And so like my buddy John from my hometown, and he's started the show with me, and he was going to have a big birthday blowout bash at this bar, and all his friends and musicians were going to come down. It was going to be great. And it was great. And he was getting hemmed up by like, this person wants this person wants that. I don't know. He's getting stressed out. I'm like, John, it's going to be your birthday no matter what. You guys are going to have a great time no matter what. It's all band people. And when you need to be a leader, you just say yes, no. And then that's the end of it. Don't even discuss it. And everybody's going to fall into line because this is your birthday.
Yeah.
And so he's like, man, you're right. I know. You're right. And so he did that. He took that attitude and he wasn't mean about it. He's like, there's no room for that, because it's a crowded night. And man, they had an epic time. They had they're still putting out videos and this was the day before Thanksgiving, which was, last month for us here. So it's been a while and they're still talking about what a great time they had. But it was easy for him to get spun up and trying to satisfy everybody. But really, he was the guy who was in charge of this whole thing, and everybody wanted to work in service of his good time.
Yeah. Being able to get pulled out of those little tailspins we get into. That's one of the big reasons having a team or having collaborators around you who you respect and who respect you, where you can act as these sanity checks for each other is really important. It's hard to do on your own. It's not impossible, but it's tough. Like, humans are pack animals ultimately. So having the right team around you is a big deciding factor in how things go.
The the other thing about when you deal with human behavior, I'm going to kind of change gears here.
Yeah.
Is you can design and set up and improve yourself, take courses, go listen to Jonam talk, go to Jonam's website, which is right below my face down there, to learn how to put this stuff to use for you. But
Yeah.
also a lot of this stuff can be used for nefarious purposes.
Mhm.
And I'll just use the term psychological operations. This is influence operations. The military does it. I've been part of these things. I've seen how they work and everything. So there's a lot of nefarious intent that goes into this stuff. How does someone identify when they are being, and this happens to every single one of us, no one is immune from it. How
Yeah.
does someone recognize when they are being manipulated, if not them specifically, them being part of the greater population towards a particular
Mhm.
goal or thought or emotion?
Yeah, God, there are so many angles to take with that. I think there are a few different things to look out for as tells, and a lot of it kind of stems from self-awareness. So things like, are you doing things or being pressured to do things that are sort of out of integrity for you or that you wouldn't normally do?
Yeah.
Another thing is, how do you feel after an interaction? Because someone can be a real slick talker and they can say all the right things and kind of get you to do or say whatever you're doing. But then after that interaction, if you're feeling bad about it, or if you just have that feeling like, oh God, something happened which I'm not happy with, then that's a red flag.
Mm.
Another thing to consider is the like self censorship and how much we feel driven to sort of wear a mask around certain people, or kind of um, I guess censor is the best word, but like how much we're speaking off a script of what we think the other person wants to hear versus how much we're able to just be ourselves, as the
Yeah.
frustrating advice goes. I think that those are things where if we're feeling ourselves pulled off center, where we're doing or saying things that aren't in line with who we want to be or how we would usually act, or we're kind of going along to get along, that deference, that agentic shift, those are all indicators that maybe the other person or group is doing it accidentally, but there is a coercive element there where we're co-conspiring in our own coercion. And
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest problems, which is like the earlier example of the sort of toxic relationships. It's like, well, the majority of people you speak to who've had that experience, they say, oh, I saw the red flags, I saw this, that, and the other thing, but I excused it away. Or I made excuses for them. They had a bad childhood, or they just need help, whatever the story is.
Yeah.
And so then the question isn't, well, how can I identify these red flags better? It's how can I stop being the co-conspirator in my own demise?
Mm.
Because I see these things, whether it's on social media or in a relationship or a business deal, and then like, how can I be the person who's not going to be compatible with the coercion? And that's like that's the kind of deeper work, but that's the most valuable, I think.
When we read a headline and it's got
Mm.
an adjective right up front, as
Yeah,
soon as people start using adjectives in any kind of political setting, they're attempting to manipulate you. Everybody should
yeah,
know this. This is an information operation trick. And so when you see the horrific, the
yeah.
tragic, the grisly, oh boy,
Mhm.
that right there should be your first sign. Like, I don't need to read this. So
Yeah.
here in America, we have a real like dispute on the president, Donald Trump. This is
Mhm.
not me politicking, not me making any statement. Got to always say that up front. Don't care. But a large portion, and I mean tens of millions of Americans, maybe even 100 million Americans, think that Donald Trump is in ill health and has lost capacity and isn't doing well.
Mm.
A whole lot of other people are like, "What are you talking about?" Right? And so that's just one circle. You have another circle, then another circle, and there's all kinds of people that are being influenced by media
Mhm.
specifically, and they're opting into. I will be unfair here, but I'm not too unfair. You tell me if I'm right or not. They're opting into some kind of cult-like behavior,
Yeah.
and we are susceptible, all of us, to these behaviors. And so like when I detect any kind of AI writing and performance of that writing, like on YouTube or whatever, I'm off, gone instantly. I don't allow myself to be there for a second. And am I a perfect AI? No, but when I detect overly verbose responses where there's a lot of repetition of things, and I'm like, that's AI, I'm
Yeah.
out. And so I leave before I get any more polluted by the thing. And then also, I want to see actual humans talking. I'd rather have you and I talk and let our fallible selves talk about whatever we're going to talk about than have a hostless voiceover that could be anybody saying anything. And then within the truth, nesting these little thorns that are designed to hook into me and take me in a different direction than I might otherwise go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's spot on, because we get polluted by our inputs, right? The media you consume consumes you, as someone said. So what we're surrounded by, it will definitely tick some of those cult type boxes. This was one of the big things I noticed was, my background was mainly these kind of fringe cult groups. And then just something happened in the UK that made me pay attention to the news. I was like, hang on a sec, I'm seeing the exact same things as black and white thinking, us versus them, forbidden words, forbidden people to listen to. There's, behavioral control, the things you are or are not allowed to say, the moral purity tests of, do you support this thing or that thing? And it's like all of these mechanisms, the shouting down, like people ganging up and shouting at dissenters, like all of this is commonplace throughout society on both sides of the political aisle. And it's just everywhere. You can't escape it.
Yeah. Yeah. And as much as we want to act like we're immune to it, we're just not, and there's so much everybody touts tolerance until they don't like something.
Yeah. 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 Live and let live, unless
Yeah, I like everybody. Yeah. It's just like this thing where like in our prison system, there's a path to redemption and there's a path to punishment. Sometimes we try to combine the two together. But boy, redemption is the ideal, right? Like, can you redeem people who've gone astray of the law and harmed people, killed people, whatever it is? And redemption doesn't mean freedom. But
no.
how do you redeem that person? That is an uncomfortable field to hoe, because you're going to make mistakes with very dangerous people that have bad intent for whatever reason, and you're not going to succeed as often as you like.
Yeah.
But it is the pure standard. How do you redeem someone? And we don't like that kind of hard work, man. We don't like it at all. And so we get really high and mighty about what someone needs to do, but we would never want to be in their shoes.
Yeah, it's much easier to just slap a label on someone rather than actually think things through in detail. And I think that's a lot of where these kind of cult-like mind traps happen, which is that the human brain is naturally lazy. We like heuristics. We like these shortcuts to conclusions, because making sense of realities, it's just a huge mess, and it's an unsolvable problem. Like, when are you going to do it? Like, it's evaded the most intelligent minds of human history. Like, am I really going to figure reality out? So we have these shortcuts we look for, like social proof. Like, okay, are the people around me, or the people who are like me, how are they responding to, say, this political figure or to this ideological movement? Okay, well, now we have tribe around us. Now there's emotion coming in. There's maybe anger at the people you're resisting, or sympathy to the people who you're sort of protecting or sympathetic to. Well, all of these things create this whirlpool of influences where, we're acting basically as sock puppets for other people's ideas or ideologies, and we as individuals get lost in the mix somewhere.
Yeah. Wow. The when you try to go in and fix something, and you don't have a solid grasp or on what, like, the situation was when you got there, and when there's existing vendetta, heck, forget vendetta, vendetti, like the plural of vendetta, and you don't account for these things, you don't know the score, right?
No.
And so as we try to deal with human behavior and we're not getting the outcome we want, there's a problem. And this is just one example of how this might go astray. Like, Jonam and Pete have been mad at each other for years and years. Pete stole Jonam's wife. And so Of course they're not going to get along. But we're like, but the goal is to get these guys together to work on this other thing. Like, not going to happen ever,
Right.
because there's this damage, this wound that is, so we don't like to have to understand people in a way that makes sense. Again, we look for these heuristic shortcuts. We look for things that are achievable, but we haven't even figured out for Pete and Jonam where the work would be in a reconciliation before they ever agreed to exchange power in a political setting in this crazy example.
Yeah. The rivalries run so deep, and this tribalism is a part of human nature. I don't think we can really get rid of that. I don't know how you'd even start. And so then the question that I had to wrestle with was, well, how, given that this is an instinct we're not going to get rid of, how can we at least train it in a useful direction? And so for myself personally, so I was very new to the whole political sphere. I was completely detached from it for the first like 25 years of my life. And then when I did start looking into culture and society, I had to dumb it right down to first principles and see how can I navigate this mess. And the tribalism of like a political party in the UK, we have Conservative and Labour are the main ones. And you'll get sort of tribal, multi-generational, like our family only votes for Labour or for the Tories. And I was mercifully free from that, the sort of tribalistic aspect of it. But then the question was, okay, maybe I need to organize instead of right versus left. If I place, let's say the value of truth, or at least the pursuit of truth, then I'll put that on a pedestal as the kind of North Star, and let's see where that gets me. Or another word I really like is syntropy, which is the opposite of entropy in the philosophical sense. Like, how can we, what are the outcomes we're steering towards? And well, if you pair that with truth, so well, it has to be grounded in reality. It has to be reflecting the sort of the data, the feedback we're receiving, like you said earlier. Has to be responding to that and building in a useful direction. And so just with those kind of first principles and expanding from there, I found that very helpful when there's so much information to cut through. Everyone's shouting on the news, and the enemy is always Hitler or Stalin or one of these, like everyone's just characterized in this very lazy rhetoric. And so, well, can we cut through the rhetoric and get to the reality underneath it a little more? And then operate from there.
This goes back to where we were a few minutes ago with the horrific, the tragic, when someone says it's an existential crisis.
Yeah.
I mock things when I use that accent. But I'm like, we're like 25-0 now against these existential crises. And it becomes comical. Like, is this really, that's your way of describing it? Then sorry, I opt out. I don't want that. Right. And so I am a centrist in that. There are parts of me that are left-leaning, parts of me that are right-leaning, parts of me that are like, that just I don't care. I've got other things to worry about. Not that I'm cold or calloused, but I'm not going to be moved by things like the existential crisis or this person's Hitler. I mean, we're always looking for Hitler, but we never talk about looking for Rousseau or anybody else. So we ignore all these other folks, especially if they have a particular point of view, and it's convenient for our narrative. I'm like, well. Hitler's dead, been dead almost 100 years now. He's not back, he's not coming back, and you're not going to prevent him by being there. And by the way, nobody gets to choose what side of history they're on. What the side we're on is forgotten, just so we all know. We're all clear on this, right? And so I'm not going to waste precious time and minutes of my life on these things where I'm being told that the sky is falling, and I'm like, hey, yeah, some things suck. And in this economy, like the economy is always bad wherever we're in it. It's always bad. We always feel this, right? But these are the things that cause us to respond in a certain way. And we do tend to run home to wherever we feel comfortable. And if that's as a Tory or, wherever it's going to be, that's where we go. And so it's almost like a rallying cry in a lot of cases.
And that's another really common tactic of manipulation, is keeping people in a state of fear. And this works on collectives, it works on individuals. It's a high state of fear and a low sense of sort of self-agency and autonomy, and also self-esteem, self-worth. If you can diminish someone's sense of what they're worthy and capable of and increase their sense of impending doom, then they will go right into this amygdala hijack, and they will opt for like the autopilot, like what feels familiar or what's everyone else doing, because like, how are you going to strike out and figure it all out on your own, given everything that's happening?
Yeah. When you were at SpyQ, what were your thoughts on some of the other presenters?
It was a great group of people, and it always feels kind of humbling to me when I'm presenting alongside people like yourself, or like I forget the Australian guy's name, the one who got shot like 100 times. Derek. And like these real impressive guys who've done impressive things. I'm like, boy, I've never been shot at that I know of. At least that they had a silencer and they missed if they did try. But so being able to learn from people like that, and then go, okay, how can I, from my background, which is very different, then try and provide something of equivalent value to people. So I really enjoyed it, and I found the people in the room to be very sort of inspiring types of people. Like one of the best parts in it was it was after the first day, wasn't it, when there was the VIP section in the evening? So it was you, Gavin, and Derek, all just kind of fielding questions, and it was great.
Yeah, that was a fantastic moment. I mean, I liked it because I got to talk a lot, but I had relevant experience, and so it was appropriate for me to talk. All of the stuff that we covered, even if for me it got a little hard because my body was worn out from traveling and my back hurts, so I've got to go walk around, and so I've only got so much time I can sit in a chair and actually focus. I've got a kind of a conference method that I use to keep my body engaged and happy. But I found so much of it, even Aunt Flynn, who talked about style, I found it all just very relatable to my job that I had done when I was doing field collection. You know, it did matter how I dressed. Now, look, my choice was not for style in the fashionable sense. My style was to stand out from the army. This is not the guy who is the army. You know, so if I could, I avoided wearing a weapon. I wore a ball cap instead of a helmet. I had a helmet with me because you have to have one, but I used it as like a table. So I'd rest my arm on it and take my notes and everything. So much of what all of you guys provided, I'm like, you know, I may not know that system, I may not know your checklist, but I have used all of these skills in my day-to-day approach to being a spy, you know, and understanding. I didn't learn it today. I didn't show up with all these tools, everybody. It took a long time, it took a lot of mistakes to sort it out. But all the things we're talking about, I have stories of when I started to figure these things out about humans, and I still make mistakes at it. It's hard to do, but man, oh man, that training was super relatable for me to the very thing that we're trying to teach people how to do. And I'm like, yes, more of that, more of that. It was great. And you certainly were part of that group of things of understanding all of it, all this manipulation. I use manipulation in a positive way. You can manipulate a joint to ease discomfort, you know? So yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah. It was a great event, and the response of people as well was really encouraging, because I think people are hungry for this kind of work, and then these kinds of skills, and the audience was all, you know, mostly just kind of normal civilian people, let's say. So it's the teachers were from like military intelligence or some related kind of background, but the audience were everyday people who are really responding to it. And my theory behind this is, like I said at the event, we're in this era of 5th generational warfare where the front line is inside your own brain. It's a mind and hearts campaign that we're all living through, well, thousands of them simultaneously. So then how can you arm yourself to navigate the landscape we are now in? And I think people are just collectively like twigging onto this now.
Yeah. Boy, you said a lot there. So anytime someone says 5th generation warfare, I also like try to remind us all that there's elements of 6th generation warfare going on too. And you have to sort of decide what that is, but you look for things that are new ways of doing the old thing or completely new things. And so we are for sure in 5th generation for a lot of us, right? Some of us are still in 3rd because that's how the world also works. There's a a latency to how fast these combat things move. But yeah, that internal battle, I call this the infrastructure of the mind. And if you were to walk through someone's living room that's in their head, you'd want the light on. But that's not how it works. You got to bang your toes on stuff. You got to, oh, that's a sofa. Oh, that's a divan. Oh, I don't even know what this is. Is that a porcelain cheetah? Jesus Christ. And so it doesn't make sense to you when you first get into that mental infrastructure for someone who's a sheikh or whatever. But also you don't run through a dark room with furniture in it and expect to run right through it clean, right? So you have to slow down and go, this is delicate work here. And me smashing into all his shit's going to make him mad. It's going to hurt me. So I've got to slow down. That's kind of how I liken these things. So when we talk about if you come across a farmer, if you come across a businessman in a war-torn country, that person is only going to move as fast as they're comfortable moving. It's risk. Everything they do is risky for them. And they've been through a lot. If I have PTSD from being in war, what do they have? And we never think about the other end of these equations. And so slowing down and navigating that infrastructure of the mind, I would say is critical to trying to deal with humans and going at the pace that they're comfortable with, because none of us are perfectly in sync. Some of us is always ahead or behind the other person, whether that's good or bad, depending on the situation.
Yeah. The emotional intelligence is one of the biggest deciding factors in how well we do. I went on a bodyguard close protection training course, and not for a career change, just because I wanted to know the stuff. And it was fascinating how you're learning all these frameworks and the practical skills, etc. That was interesting enough. But the most interesting thing to me was when I'd ask the instructors questions and they might share a story as an answer. And the level of being able to like understand and empathize with people who you may have nothing in common with, but to be able to then create that human connection with someone that you don't have anything in common with, like that's a whole different level of skill. And hearkening to one of your opening thoughts, it's like you can't really learn that from a book. You can't really learn that from theory, or you could, but just the emotional intelligence of in real life, in the conversation, not just calculating what the other person's at, but having an empathetic response to it. And empathy, I don't necessarily mean endorsement or what agreement, but just being able to put yourself in their shoes and like you said, kind of figure out what the living room is like there. It's an extra level of mastery, I think.
And I would add another discipline into that. Anytime I hear someone talk about emotional intelligence, this is not a knock on you in any way at all, but we tend to ignore cultural intelligence. So my ability to understand your feelings is limited if I can't comprehend your culture. And so Pete would put culture above emotional intelligence, but you have to have both of those elements in your kit bag so you know how to apply both of them. So like when a mom from a war-torn family is crying and desperate, and you know that you cannot help that woman because that's not your job, but you are trying to communicate that. And there's a whole lot of both of those, cultural and emotional intelligence, that you've got to master in a way that allows you to go back out the next day and go do your job and fail a lot more, because these things are hard. And I talk about the failure side of this because we tend to project success and accuracy in our stories. But the reality is if you haven't made a bunch of mistakes, if you don't continue to make mistakes, you're making the first mistake. We are flawed creatures and we fall into traps. And maybe you and I are better at sidestepping a trap, but how many times have we sidestep a trap and look down and be like, oh, God damn it.
Yeah. Out of the frying pan into the fire. Yeah.
Yeah. It's easy to do.
Yeah. Very.
Yeah. We got a few minutes left. We haven't covered everything, obviously, because we could do this 5 more times, but what else do you want to get into before we wrap this thing up?
I think it's really important to just kind of round out the theme that we were alluding to, which is how can we, as human beings navigating the modern world, have more psychological sovereignty? Or you could think of it as like cognitive security. Sometimes people like it that phrased that way. And the through line, like you've mentioned a few really important things. like managing our inputs? Are we just being fed AI drivel? Or even if it's not AI, am I reading things that are designed to keep me in a state of fear? So I'm then I'm just in a state of amygdala hijack, and then, easy to manipulate. So watching our inputs, that's like vital. The other thing of introducing that question of like, hey, is this actually in my best interests? As basic as that is, or people will want some kind of fancy pants, wizardy scripts they can do. But the truth is that just being able to introduce that space between stimulus and response, and just to catch the autopilot, where it's like, okay, my knee-jerk reaction is to do as this person says, or to respond in a certain way when that person says something. When we can get curious about that stimulus response cycle and say, well, is my autopilot response actually serving me, or is it like an antique? Is it a vestigial thing from maybe a childhood, parent-child dynamic or something like that? And just having that curiosity towards our own landscape, towards that living room in our own minds, of seeing, well, where are the mechanisms serving me, and where can I actually make a change that's going to then have all those downstream effects, like we said about the people getting out of cults or abusive relationships. If you don't fix that sense of deservedness, or of boundaries, or of being able to say no, what a concept, then all the you could write a doctorate on narcissistic abuse, and it won't do you any favors. So just finding those driving mechanisms of what's actually leading to the outcomes. Oh,
sorry, one of us froze. I don't know who it was, but we'll go forward from there. Yeah. The just to amplify what you're saying and just take it from a slightly different point of view, but just as founded in science and everything else, is that animal brain, that limbic system, the parasympathetic nervous system. When we deal and understand that those things exist, and so that response to that emotional bait that we take, if you do take that second, because fight, flight, freeze, right? Like those are the common three responses we talk about. You can train yourself out of those responses. You still may freeze, but then you say, I run towards combat. And so you run towards combat, and that's your default. When you hear the AI patter of words, you say, up, I disengage, and now instead of being flight, where it's based on negative things, this is like, no, I depart. That's not worth my time. If something tragic happens, airplane, and I'm still alive, I get the hell off the airplane, because that's the next most likely outcome, is that you die because you stayed on too long, right? Like when a fire alarm goes off, you leave the building, you don't look around, you go, I'm getting the hell out of here, even if it's just a test. So, and then when your body responds automatically to these inputs, detect it, and then override as soon as you can, because there's a gap, right? And so the longer you let the parasympathetic system dominate, the faster you go to hyperventilation. Nobody for any common reason purposely hyperventilates, right? Like we go into anxiety mode and we make worse decisions because we are in this limbic brain. So yeah, slow down. Your first response, if you're an adult, is probably not the correct one as often as we want, especially if it's an emotional response. Sometimes like you might judge somebody just simply. I used to judge people because they put Parmesan cheese in their spaghetti, right? That's just me. And that's ridiculous. I'm like, that's weakness. And then my daughter said she did the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, I used to do that too. I don't do that anymore because I'm an adult now. But there's all kinds of things like that in life where you put someone into a category and it's completely unfair to you and them because you've not done the work, and they certainly don't deserve that kind of judgment.
Yeah, and like you say, it's not fair to you as the person judging either, because as soon as you make a judgment, then that becomes a bias. So anything after that point is going through the confirmation bias of, oh, how was my previous assessment correct? And then we miss a bunch of like our brain will delete it from our perception, and we'll could miss something really important.
Yeah, that capture that you talk about, once you get captured in that moment. So when you go see a farmer and you don't listen to them, and they're like, I don't need your help with Why? I need your help with M. And I'm like, oh, M? Shit, we got days of M that we just sitting there wasting. I can give you M all day long. And my example would be, I was in Bosnia, and this farmer, we're like, hey, how are you doing? And we're trying to solve all these big problems. And he's like, man, we're getting our lives back going together again. But this construction stuff in the sun, it's just killing us. We don't have access to sunscreen. And I'm like, but we got truckloads of sunscreen. I'll bring you some. And that guy was so grateful. He cried because they should live in a country where that simple thing like sunscreen was commonly available, but it wasn't. And his guys and they were hurting, but they still had to build these homes. And so the simple act of giving them, I'm saying, run out of this stuff as fast as you can. There's going to be more here. It's just I'm going to keep, I don't care if it gets black marketed. I want you guys to have it. And that turned into him introducing me to a guy that I needed to know on the spy side. He's like, listen, my uncle was a bad guy. You should go talk to him. I'll introduce you. And he said specifically was a bad guy. Not that he was a bad guy anymore, Yeah.
That human element, again, like you said, the emotional intelligence, the cultural intelligence, moving through life in a way where you're kind of taking care of things or seeing these needs and then helping fulfill them. It's not in a codependent way, but it's just in that kind of benevolent way. It gets so many great downstream results that, again, can't be predicted.
What happens when you get burned with that approach? Because you will at some point.
I personally chalk it up on the kind of losses and wins things. It's like if I'm winning 8 out of 10 and then 2 out of 10, someone's ungrateful or they're, it burns me somehow. It's an acceptable outcome at that point. If it starts skewing too much, where it's like you're getting completely taken advantage of, like 90% of the time, then it needs to be re-examined. But generally, I think operating in an ethical way is the most sustainable way. Maybe there are situations where actual coercion or threat or things like that are appropriate because it's maybe combat related or whatever. Fine. But in everyday life, like the whole golden rule thing of treating people how you want to be treated is a good philosophy. I do think we reap what we sow.
Yeah. And there is some cost to doing business. If you're going to expose yourself to these things and give folks a chance and give yourself a chance, then sometimes it's not going to go your way. And also, we're a lot more, I keep saying this, we're a lot more fallible than we realize. So I might put the wrong input into that situation. And sometimes it's better to be reactionary than proactive, because sometimes you can get way in front of a problem that doesn't exist. And you're like, oh, I'm here by myself. That problem didn't exist. And so, it's a dance, right? It's that balancing thing. Like, oh my God, I can't seem to balance. Well, that's probably what normal is in most situations. It's really hard to have a stable balance.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it boils down to what kind of person you want to be. And are you doing it for external validation, or are you doing it because that's how you want to move through the world? And there's all these quotes which are attributed to Churchill. This is one of them, which may not have been him.
Right.
Apparently, one time, he was walking in front of a lady into a building, so he held the door open for her, and she was kind of offended. She was in the sort of women's rights movement, and she was like, "Oh, did you do that just because I'm a woman?" And he said, "No, I did it because I'm a gentleman."
Right.
And so having this ethos of how do I want to live, what kind of, how do I want to treat people? How am I going to be able to sleep at night? Or, what's going to actually sit well with me going forward? Then in the course of that, assuming that, you have all these other things squared away of not being codependent, not being, taken advantage of, then, the occasional losses will be it will be a net positive in the end. That's what I believe.
Some of those losses turn into wins down the road too, because you're planting seeds all the time and putting faith in faith that it's going to balance out in the end and probably be on the positive side.
You can't predict. This is one of the big lessons that I learned in life is that some of the situations which went not at all the way I wanted them to, after the dust has settled and time's passed, I'm so grateful I didn't get what I wanted. You can imagine my boneheaded like 20-year-old self,
Oh my God.
12 years ago, if he'd got all the things that he wanted, like just imagine the chaos.
Oh yeah.
It would have been awful. And so having those things where life says no to you in retrospect sometimes can be, actually, life, nature, God, whatever, knew better than me, and it's turned out okay.
You talked about everybody knowing their elevator pitch in a company. Why don't you do yours for us so we can all go to thefractaleffect.com and get ourselves a little bit of Jonam's knowledge? Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead to thefractaleffect.com. The newsletter there, the Fractal Effect Briefing, is full of insights where we're applying psychology, influence, and narrative warfare to the civilian world so that you can wield influence ethically and so you can make the impact you want to make without having to sacrifice integrity.
I love it. All right, everybody. Make sure you check out Jonam. He's right there next to me. There's his link down below. Definitely check it out. I think you guys will dig it. If you're interested in SpyQ, also definitely let me know about that. We're building some pretty big things, pretty big events. I think you guys will dig it. Not a commercial for SpyQ, just excitement about something in the future. We both went and had a great time. Anything in closing before I push the stop button on this thing, Jonam?
No, just operate with sovereignty, respect your own sovereignty, respect other people's sovereignty, and hopefully we can make the world a little less chaotic.
Love it. Everybody, I'll see you in a little while. I've got a fantastic guest. You guys will love him. And I will talk to you in a second, Jonam. Everybody else, I'll see you in a few hours.